60 Minutes Rewind.
This is a tale of two cities side by side, one predominantly white and middle class, the other almost exclusively black and poor. It's a tale first told by a small newspaper in the virtually all-white community of Belleville, Illinois, about what happened to blacks from neighboring East St. Louis when they came to town. We first heard about it when the small newspaper won several major journalism awards and began losing a lot of subscribers. Belleville, Illinois is a typical Midwestern community filled with civic pride. It has annual parades, good schools, strong, stable neighborhoods, and it's one of the last places in America where you can still find the original Golden Arches. In many ways, Belleville is a picture of white middle-class contentment. But right over there on the other side of this highway is East St. Louis, Illinois. It is 98% black, and almost every one of its 40,000 residents is receiving welfare or some other form of public assistance. It also has the highest per capita murder rate in the country, higher than New York City or Washington, D.C.
It's in the top 10 as far as being the most crime-ridden city in the country. It's in the top 10. That's not my fault. I just don't want that filtering over into this city.
Bob Hearst is Belleville's chief of police, and like a lot of people in town, he was born and raised in East St. Louis. But that was before white flight, before blacks began moving into East St. Louis during the 60s, and before whites began moving out to Belleville.
I don't want Belleville to become another East St. Louis, and neither does the Belleville residents.
That fear is so widespread that a few years ago, when a crime wave swept the wealthy Signal Hill area of Belleville, residents got together and spent their own money to build a wrought iron gate right on the edge of the city. This is East St. Louis right over here on the other side of this road.
Yes, sir, it is. Yes, sir.
If I lived in East St. Louis and I was black, I'd look at this and I'd say, the message is pretty clear. Those people don't want me over here.
I would probably feel that way.
Does that bother you?
No, sir. I didn't put it up.
But you approve of it?
I don't disapprove of it.
Blacks in East St. Louis got the message that they aren't welcome in Belleville a long time ago. But Belleville is hard to avoid. Many blacks from East St. Louis work there, and it's the county seat, where they have to pay taxes, get marriage licenses, and conduct all manner of public business. And they have long suspected that the all-white Belleville Police Department had an unwritten policy designed to discourage them from coming to town.
It's a known fact in East St. Louis, don't ride in Belleville after dark.
Why?
Because you will be pulled over, especially if it's black males that are involved.
Constance Massey was giving two male friends of hers a ride home to East St. Louis after work when they were pulled over by a Belleville policeman.
He said, who is that in the car with you? I seen beer. I said, we don't drink, sir. And he said, what kind of drugs you got in there? And they searched us. They threw us up against the car, patted us down, took my back seat out of my car.
But police didn't find any drugs or alcohol. Why do you think you stopped him?
Because I was black, definitely, because I was black, and I had two black gentlemen in the car with me.
Did he say anything to you that would lead you to that conclusion?
Definitely, because he asked me what was I doing up in Belleville, like I wasn't good enough to be up here at all.
Reporters at the Belleville News-Democrat, the city's local paper, had long heard stories about police harassment of blacks. But in 1991, managing editor Greg Edwards says the paper received a tip from a former policeman that seemed to confirm all those rumors.
If you were black and came to Belleville, there was a good chance you were going to be stopped, questioned, maybe ticketed for a minor violation, maybe arrested and taken to jail.
After a 4-month investigation that involved dozens of interviews with anonymous police sources and motorists, and after going through more than 175,000 traffic tickets, the News-Democrat was able to document that Belleville Police Chief Bob Hearst had organized a special 4-man patrol to target and harass black motorists from East St. Louis.
Some of them had been stopped and not ticketed, simply questioned, what are you doing here? Others were handcuffed, tossed into a police car. One woman told us that she was pregnant, had handcuffs put on her and her arms put behind her back, and she was shoved roughly into a police car. Others told us that there were frequent references to them when they were stopped as that sort of language.
The paper's big break came when reporter Carolyn Tuff stumbled upon an important piece of information. Belleville's police department writes the driver's race on the top of every ticket it issues. So she was able to segregate all the tickets written to blacks. And when she compared that information to the 4 men assigned to the unit, this is what she discovered.
75% of all tickets written by these 4 men were to blacks. And we have a 7% population of blacks in Belleville. So the disparity there is striking, if not alarming.
They were going out looking for blacks.
Yes, they were.
No other way to interpret that information.
I don't think so.
Tuff says that blacks were cited mostly for non-moving violations, like driving with an expired license or without insurance.
Violations that you wouldn't be able to detect unless you'd actually stopped someone and pulled them over.
Right.
And from police sources, she learned something else.
For every person that was pulled over and ticketed, this unit pulled a handful over and didn't ticket them. The idea was to let the black people know that they weren't welcome in Belleville.
There's no way we targeted blacks to keep them out of Belleville. No way. And no officer on this police department was ever issued an order like that from me.
Chief Hearst doesn't deny he organized the Special Patrol Unit during that crime wave several years ago on Signal Hill. But he insists his orders were to target all suspicious-looking motorists, black and white. But the more he talked, the more he seemed to contradict himself. First, he told us what the state police told him.
The Signal Hill area was being infiltrated by the black gangs out of East St. Louis. And they would come up here in order to be initiated into the gang and either steal a car, break into a house, rape, rob, home invasion, whatever.
And that any black males that were driving around the Signal Hill area were potential suspects.
That's correct.
Because they were black?
Because they were in that area and because they were black, yes, sir.
You seem to be saying that being a black male and driving a car in the white area of Signal Hill is probable cause to believe that they're going to commit a crime.
Not necessarily so. If there's something wrong with their car, we would stop them. Or if there was more than one in the car, we would stop them.
But not every black's a
That's correct.
gang member.
That's correct.
But you're saying that essentially you were stopping all the blacks.
Not all of them. No, we didn't stop all of them. We stopped most of them. If they were in
Two black
that area.
males riding in a car.
If they were in that area.
It turns out street gangs from East St. Louis had nothing to do with the raping and robbing. It was all the work of one man, and he had no connection to the street gangs. Neither does Zach Conklin. He's a district manager for Texaco Oil in Belleville, who's been stopped by police there several times.
You say anything that made you believe that he stopped you because you were black?
Tell me to get back down that way.
What do you mean by that?
Get back down towards East St. Louis. That's what he meant by that.
Last year, he was cited for 3 non-moving violations, including driving with an expired license and no automobile insurance, charges that were untrue and later dropped. Now he uses back roads when he drives to Belleville.
It's happened more to me than once. It's happened a few days before this when I had my son in the car and I got pulled over for no apparent reason. Then my son asked me, "Daddy, why did they pull you over?" And
What do you tell him?
I told him I don't know. And he goes again, "Why did they pull you over, Daddy?" And, you know, what can I tell my 5-year-old son, you know, about that?
I have to tell you, Chief, if I was a black male, I think I would consider it harassment. If all I was doing was driving through a white neighborhood in Belleville and I got stopped by the police every time I went through.
Well, that's your opinion, and you're entitled to your opinion. But if you lived in that area, you would want the police department, the sheriff's office, and the state police to be doing something about it. And that's what we did.
And the people of Belleville seem glad he did. Chief Hearst has never been more popular.
He keeps the crime out. I don't know why the news media is always on to him about the blacks.
If it weren't for Robert Hearst, then we would have all the crime, and we might as well just move down the hill.
To East St. Louis.
Right.
Right. I agree. I think that East St. Louis has a definite problem, and we don't want it here.
What are you talking about when you say you want to keep East St. Louis out or keep it out? Are you saying what you want to keep out is black people?
No, we want to keep the crime rate out, the crime problems, the drug problems, the murders, the burglaries, the car thefts. That's what we don't want in Belleville.
I live in East St. Louis. How can they distinguish me from somebody else who may commit a crime. They have to treat me the same way that they would treat any other citizen.
Reverend Johnny Scott is president of the NAACP's East St. Louis chapter. We interviewed him along with the Urban League's local representative, James Buford.
The fact of the matter is, there was a crime wave. People in Belleville were terrified, and the police chief's job, he says, was to try and crack down on it.
That's a cop-out.
But what's he supposed to do? What's the chief of police supposed to do?
He's supposed to investigate and prosecute under the law of the land. When whites commit crimes in Belleville, does that mean whites are then run out of Belleville? That happened in Dodge City in the Wild West. They have techniques and strategies within the law without harassing, without violating citizens' rights.
And what kind of a reaction did the News Democrat get for performing what it thought was a public service? Well, it won a lot of major newspaper awards and a lot of grief back in Belleville.
The reaction was almost totally against the News Democrat, not against the policemen who were doing the ticketing or against the city administration that allegedly ordered it, but against us.
Well, what they were saying was, you may think we've got a problem, we don't think we've got a problem.
Some of them said exactly that.
And some of them said a lot more. The newsroom was flooded with angry calls and threats. Local businesses pulled their ads, and more than 1,000 readers canceled their subscriptions, a huge number for such a small paper. But it kept on digging.
They're there to write stories, make news, and the hell with what happens to the community.
Belleville Mayor Richard Brower really hated the article about city hiring practices. In its entire history, 175 years, Belleville has never had a black employee.
Didn't that strike you as strange? You've been mayor here since 1979.
That's right.
No black faces in City Hall?
No.
You never noticed it?
No, I never noticed it. Exactly
You didn't
right.
know you needed a black employee. Is that what you're saying?
We needed a black employee. No, we didn't have any quota systems here or anything like that. No. What do you mean?
We didn't have one.
Since the News Democrat ran that story, the city of Belleville finally hired its first black employee, a sanitation worker.
He was one of two finalists, the other finalist being my nephew, and he was hired. My nephew wasn't.
Does that upset you?
No, it doesn't upset me. I don't have any problem with it. I don't have any problem with it. My sister probably does, but I don't.
The city's decision to finally hire a black employee was not exactly voluntary. It was done under the threat of legal action by the Illinois State Department of Human Rights. Belleville settled out of court, agreeing to hire an affirmative action officer and to send the entire Belleville Police Department to racial sensitivity training, including Chief Hearst. Although some might say it doesn't seem to have done much good.
In my own heart and mind, I know I've done what's right for the people of the city of Belleville. And if I had it to do over again, I would do it again tomorrow the same way, Steve. I guarantee you.